Hi, this is Wes Simpson, founder of LearnIPVideo.com, hosting another session of the AIMS IP Showcase, Alliance for IP Media Solutions, NAB New York. With me today is Dave Chiappini from Matrox. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Wes.
Tell us a little bit about what you do for Matrox, Dave.
So I'm the Executive VP of Research and Development for Matrox. What that means is all things engineering and all things product related pretty much report into me. And so I handle things from the engineering side, customer support side, and product management for Matrox.
Wow, that sounds like a hefty role. And you're also pretty active in AIMS, aren't you?
I am. I have because in my spare time when I'm not working the 23 hours a day, uh, I'm also chairing the ProAV work group in AIMS, which really is the driver for the IPMX standard.
Yeah, IPMX seems like a really interesting new concept. I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of taking some existing standards and moving them into the Pro AV market, which has been a little bit of a wild west for a while, I guess, huh?
Yeah, the Wild West is a good description. There's a lot of proprietary solutions, many of them out there, and whereas broadcast has some big influential end customers and IHV suppliers, ProAV is kind of missing the big customer who can help define the market or pull it. There's just a lot of small niches spread out. Combined makes a very sizable market, but because of that construction, there hasn't been as big of a pull to unify things. But I do think that that trend is really building as people realize they just can't keep investing over and over and over, reinventing the same wheel.
Hmm.
And I get it. We started this almost like 18, 19 months ago, and it becomes like the discussions that I'm having now are very different than what we had back then. You can tell that the world has made a significant move towards
Hmm.
wanting this standard.
Yeah, yeah, I could see. I mean, so the Pro AV market is pretty widespread. I mean, it covers a huge range from simple conference room systems all the way up to integrated platforms that on the enterprise. Where do you see the real opportunities for IPMX?
Well, the shift to AV over IP, this market space that's developed on the Pro AV side, is really very similar to what 2110 is for broadcast, right? It's how do I transport my audio, video, and control in a controlled, organized manner throughout my organization. And of course, in broadcast, it's a standard, so I can have my interoperability, my point solutions, my unified software solutions to manage the whole thing. And ProAV is striving for the same thing. There's a lot of moving of video content around, whether it's education or signage or information display or medical facility, like military, police, crisis management, control, like it's all over the place. Especially today, people want to communicate and tell their stories and describe how they're getting things done and gain information. It's all by audio, video, and they need that IP flexibility. They want to be able to reach their phone, their iPad, their content on the go, make decisions, access to information. So the shift to move this onto IP and gain that flexibility, it's clear that the world needs that today. And so it's had its growing pains for sure. Flexibility usually comes with some growing pains as we learn to make things better. And I think that people are tired of just reinventing the wheel and locking themselves in. And vendor A's got the best solution for one thing, but I can't mix it with vendor B solution. It's just too painful. And I have to keep learning all of these. Open standards are going to help. Broadcast knows this inside and out. Open standards help really propel the market forward. Stop inventing the foundation layers. Just make those solid. And if you want to add value vertically on top of it. And that's how we're going to really get all that extra energy to really increase the added value story. History's repeated it many, many times. Open standards really help propel markets forward. And it's what this effort is all about.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So what exactly is covered by the IPMX standard, and where does the standard sort of, sit today?
Well, the standard is heavily related. The 2110 and NMOS pretty much make up the foundation.
Hmm.
We went after using a very battle-hardened foundation that was tested and proven out through people with very exacting standards. But in the ProAV community, they don't need such uh, exactness in their standards. And so what we did is we looked at the problem and we calibrated some of the settings, some of the features. We added a few to make up the extra requirements and do gap filling. But fundamentally, the foundation is exactly 2110 with some very, very careful relaxing and a few additions.
Mm.
And we tried to stay as true as possible to the original standard so that if a vendor desired, he could build the same piece of equipment and it would work in both environments. If he really wanted to customize and make it only IPMX compatible, maybe you could shave off some precision elements and so on in your design and then, pigeonhole. But I think that by serving all communities with a single piece of hardware, you actually can get a relatively solid mass market appeal product that can sell into both spaces. So IPMX was built that it enables both. That if you really wanted to go after only the ProAV and focus solely on size, cost optimization, or did you want to have the biggest market available to you? Well, then you could do both. You have that option of pursuing both. But certainly, broadcast exactingness wasn't needed in every ProAV application.
Mm.
And so by reducing some of that exactness, we were able to achieve some interesting cost savings in a final implementation and inherently some simplification because that exactness drives complexity.
Hmm.
We took some of that out for the ProAV use cases.
So can you comment a little bit on some of the things that were relaxed within 2110 to make IPMX a little bit more, cost effective for the Pro AV market?
So one of the things that I think is probably the bigger stumbling block these days is how tightly I can get my PTP clocks balanced on my network. And I've got my boundary scan switches that run at 25 gig, and I've got my Grandmaster clock, all expensive equipment, very complex to calibrate, and I got to know my limits and how to install multiple ones and so on. Well, IPMX, if this stuff is on the network, it will definitely take advantage of it. And hey, let's go with the higher precision, no problem. But you don't necessarily need that. And so IPMX can run a 2110 network, but because of some of the relaxed timings, I can do this with Netgear or TrendNet or Linksys switches, which don't carry the expense of some of the other ones. Yes, granted, you're giving up some of your clock precision. I'm not going after my 2 nanosecond 1588V 2.1, but I don't really need that in the majority of ProAV use cases, right? So by relaxing that, I can buy much less expensive switches. I don't need a Grandmaster clock. I can use any peer that gets elevated by the 1588 standard. So we didn't change anything. We're using the exact standard that already exists. If there isn't, the way the standard exists, it picks the best, highest value clock that is available on your network. And so if there isn't a $15,000 GPS tracked clock on your network, well, it's going to pick the best nearest master and it'll promote one of the peers that's on your network. So IPMX can live in that world, and it can also live in a world where you don't need to have, like if there isn't a Grandmaster on your network, it will still work and operate. Of course, every time you remove one item, you're going to get less precision. But in many use cases, I don't need that precision. So why impose it on everybody? And so as long as you can make that clear and you tell people exactly what will happen as you take your steps, if I'm doing a point-to-point video extension, I just don't need to have all of this PTP lock and so on. What I want perhaps is lowest latency, but I don't need it to be relative to any of the other elements. So how do we cost reduce that? So I can put in, a much, much less expensive switch, but I get a much simpler design at the end, right? And of course, because all these criteria are removed, well, you don't need to be as careful with your network implementation. So I didn't have to go in and change half of the switch programming. Chances are in its standard default state, it was able to carry my signal and do well enough. Of course, as you want a more precise solution, you'll go in, you'll set the QoS settings in your switch, you'll make sure that you turn on boundary scan, you'll make sure that you add the grandmaster clock, and every level gives you or your switch will be PTP aware. Every level will give you an increase in precision. And so ultimately, if I want that 2 nanosecond lock time, not lock time, 2 nanosecond pixel accuracy time, I don't even know if we can get to 2 nanoseconds, but 1588 says you do, then you can get there. But if you don't need it, then why exercise? Why ask for it? So all IPMX, what it did is it explains how to back off intelligently and how to design in consequence so that you don't need to have that level of precision on your network if you don't need it in your application.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what role does compression play within IPMX?
Well, in broadcast, obviously, the compression was hard to swallow, and they are looking at compression like JPEG XS, very light levels of compression, and JPEG XS does a great job. And it's also what we're looking at for IPMX. So for high quality, ultra low latency applications, JPEG XS is a great fit. But we're also now investigating high compression solutions like H.264 HEVC, because there are going to be ProAV use cases where I want to get that signal to my phone, my iPad, for whether it's monitoring or for decision making or for whatever the case is. Why can't I have that done through IPMX as well? Because I want to reach every screen. I want to get my content everywhere, anytime, so that I can always have access to it. And so high compression is necessary. I'm not sending JPEG XS over a Wi-Fi network. Probably could, but it would be very limited how I could do that.
Right, right. And you need what, 7 antennas at each end or something, right?
Yes, and lead suit, because I'm not sure the radiation is not going to make you glow at night, but that's okay. So yeah, it's just joking. But so the point was, we're trying to make it as accessible as possible, right? Because ultimately, we use the video and the audio to tell our stories. We use the control to make sure that they're delivered properly. And we need to get that over every medium. And Wi-Fi is a valid medium. Internet is a valid medium. WAN is a valid medium. So it's LAN, of course, and primarily, but we are going to build the extension layers. I mean, even 2110 already has a WAN effort going on, and it's quite valid. And we looked at it, and it looks like it's something that we can readily absorb into IPMX as well. And so the more that the standard evolves and hand in hand, and we can reuse all the tech that's already proven out, it's fantastic. That standards need lots of supporters, and I don't want to deviate and create more and more little fragmented standards. It's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So I'd rather leverage as much as it can, and when it needs something a little different, well, we'll have to work on that little difference. I'm not sure broadcast wants high compression solutions, okay, but ProAV does need it. But
Right.
hey, you know what? I'm willing to bet that at some point the broadcaster is going to say, I wish I had the ability to have, the same exact standard, but with high compression for use cases A, B, and C. Maybe the codec they want to use might be of a higher quality, but the point being, it just makes your information more accessible and more deliverable to more people in more places. And I don't think that's a bad thing for anybody.
Yeah, I think you've got a really good point there. I mean, particularly looking at what we've been through for the past, 6 or 7 months, where
Mm.
productions can't be, all next to each other and tied only to studio-based equipment and
Right.
applications. We've really got to branch out. So one of the things that is really interesting about the ST2110 suite is, above and beyond the physical media standards, but the control and the software plane to register and manage devices and things like that. How appropriate is that for the Pro AV market?
Well, I think that NMOS represents as valid an interface as any other. It's REST-based, it's relatively simple to use, it's well documented and reasonably structured. So I think it was a great thing for us to latch on to. We need some adaptations in there, and so we are working with VSF and mostly AMWA for NMOS
Hmm.
to get those adaptations that are needed. But in principle, it's a good foundation for us to work on. And so by standardizing it, you allow companies to decide that, hey, I want to build a software application that can manage all of these units, regardless of which hardware vendors you have underneath. And I can let hardware vendors build out the hardware and let them do what they're good at. But my company is a software company, and I can add value by bringing a software app in. And so now they no longer need to code for company A and company B. They code to the NMOS standard, and hey, look, all of a sudden I can have a best-in-class control app for all of these different hardware vendors. This is how we don't reinvent the wheel, and this is how the value add goes up rather than always horizontally, right?
Hmm.
This is what we need to get better and better solutions. If every time I have to reinvent all the foundation, my R&D effort stays always at the low level, but the minute that this becomes standard and I add the value on top, I can work on making it easier, more reliable, better quality. But if I'm always working at the foundation layer, then my R&D is going to focus there because I can't worry about the rest until I have this
Hmm.
piece. So if I keep reinventing this, I'm stuck at a certain height. That's why I want that open standard, so that we can worry about, let's add the energy up and differentiate that way. And let customers decide, do they want better quality? Do they want easier to use? Do they want less expensive? I don't know how they want to spin it, but every company can make their choices and the customers can make their choices and decide which are the best mix for them. And I think that's what it's really all about. It's about giving the consumer the better choices. And from an IHV point of view, I mean, Matrox now doesn't have a locked-in customer base. We're very happy to fight it out with everybody else, all on the same platform. Customers win because they get more choice
Hmm.
and better security for their investment. IHVs win because we get access to a bigger market. The only thing is, the better IHVs who give the customers what they really want are the ones that win in the longer run. So it becomes a little bit of a throw down the gauntlet and let's fight it out and let's see who's able to provide the best value. What I really like about it is that big companies have an advantage in the proprietary world, but when everything is on an open standard, even small companies can come in with very pointed niche products that do a really amazing job at something. So it gives them the opportunity to really accelerate things. Bigger companies might decide, I'm only going to buy these smaller companies to build my innovation. It changes the market dynamic completely. But I think at the end of the day, everybody ends up being, or at least all the consumers end up being the winner, and the better IHVs end up being the winner. And frankly, that's what we should all strive for. That's what's going to make things better. It's not reinventing those foundation layers.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does the NMOS stack, if you will, compare to what's available with some of the existing or legacy AV over IP solutions that you see out in the market?
So it has all the basic principles already. We have auto discovery. Hey, NMOS does auto discovery. And a good one too. It's registration based, so that I can go beyond my subnet. It's not only based on Bonjour or
Hmm.
any of these subnet bounded solutions. I have switching. I have network management. I have ISO 8 for audio channel mapping. I have there are well thought out solutions here in all the
Hmm.
different ISOs, and it continues to grow up the ladder. I think they're all valid. What we're missing in some contexts is some of the special IO that you don't really find often in broadcast, like HDMI.
Mm.
And so HDMI needs certain special things like EDID to be really plug and play. You know, usually SDI, when I plug it in, I kind of know what my signal is going to be, and it's very standardized and there's a fixed set.
Mm-hmm.
In the ProAV world, we typically have not only SMPI timings, but also VESA timings. So there are like 4:3 aspect ratios and 16:10 and all kinds of different ones.
Right.
And there are PC resolutions that are not common for broadcast. Well, ProAV needs all of those. So, you know, EDID is one of these automatic solutions that make, I plug in my cable and everything is auto configured on the fly. In a way, it makes it a lot easier. So obviously NMOS didn't have any concept of this, but now AMWA is helping to create that addition to using ISO 7 and how that's going to be established. So fantastic, let's continue down that line, right? Because now maybe a broadcaster will want to use HDMI for low cost monitoring positions or something where he doesn't want to have the expense of the very expensive SDI displays, which are much more expensive than a simple HDMI monitor.
Right.
Not
Right. Right.
everything needs that level, right? Like some things are fine to be less expensive. I just want to know there's a signal coming so I can get away with a $400 screen. I don't need a $4,000 color accurate solution.
Exactly. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. So do you see where do you see IPMX taking off? What's the timeline for it?
I would have hoped we'd be a bit further along by now, but
Oh,
things always take a little bit more time. COVID wasn't a big help, to be honest with you.
yeah, I could
Came at
imagine.
a bit of a negative time, but at the same time, I think we've made some good advancement this year. We started the year out that we were really focused in Ames only with a limited ability to reach out. And adaptation happened over the year. I mean, VSF came on board, AMWA came on board, both groups forming IPMX focused groups, picking up part of what we needed to get done. SIMTI recently also came on board and is looking to do something for IPMX as well. JTNM is talking about this as well. And we're soon to have something from an organization that most people in the broadcast side don't know called DCP, which is the company that handles protected content. Funny enough, it's for Hollywood. So you would think that broadcasters would know this, but you don't need the standard. It applies to HDMI and it's a necessary evil on HDMI.
Right.
So this is another standard that will publish a HDCP on 2110, how is this done technology. So that'll help us out as well because the IPMX has the same fundamental foundation. So that's good year. By the end of this year, I'm hoping that VSF will have finished its first round of efforts. Same with AMWA, same with DCP. And so we'll be much further along. Now, none of these are standards. They're all in the form of technical recommendations and specifications.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where SMPI can come in afterwards and finish off the job and get everything to go from the technical recommendation to the standard. So I'm hoping that by mid 2021, we're much further along and things are much more official. I'm not so sure I can say the standard will be set in stone, but I think that we'll see the first wave of IPMX products by then
Mm-hmm.
from multiple vendors. And that will also help catalyze all the final details into getting real standards moving on this side. But even with 2110, the first round were implemented with the technical recommendations and the standards followed. And I feel it's the same process going on with IPMX currently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, are there any interoperability certifications or tests going on right now, or planned for
No
IPMX?
official ones. That will have to come in time. And part of the reason why JTNM was involved is that I'm hoping they're going to be able to bring what they brought to 2110 for broadcast, that they'll be able to also bring that to the ProAV side. And I think that the interoperability testing is a key piece to add to this mix, because a standard that's not interoperable is it's no point. Then it's a new name for another proprietary standard. I think JTNM played a big role in helping to get 2110 onto the right track with their certified program and their support from Ames and so on. I think that that's key in making sure that that happens. We did some mini ones though, like we've taken units from a few companies out there today, and when we do our trade shows, we have these small mini demos of 5, 6 vendors, and they interoperate, and we're able to show that already. So because they're all founded on 2110, it's already working from the get-go. It's not such a big leap for us to get to the next level. The only bigger leap is that now we want a bunch of ProAV people, as well as the broadcast people, to join on the IPMX story.
Hmm.
So, I keep harping on IPMX, but for ProAV, and that was the initial impediments, but I think that there may be a role for it on the broadcast side as well, right?
That would make sense.
No,
Yeah.
it's not going to be for the big studios. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it can easily replace that. And there's a lot of very exacting requirements that were needed there. But in the smaller satellite offices, maybe some home offices, maybe some two-man shops and so on, I think that finding a simpler, cost-reduced solution, maybe that doesn't give you have to make some compromises, but it's very related to 2110. So maybe you can even intermix some 2110 equipment in with some lower cost IPMX equipment to kind of give you more choice
Hmm.
and allow the person to better balance and tune their budgets. Like, I want to leave my dollars for this, and I can afford a less expensive, I don't know, video distribution system for monitoring. Maybe that makes sense, right? I ultimately will have to leave it up to the customers to figure out the sweet spot for them. But I think that there's a place here too where we can bring some of that simpler, lower cost solution to the broadcast space as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of places in a broadcast facility that don't need broadcast quality video. The proverbial TV in the lobby and things like that.
Yeah,
A little
yeah,
bit overkill to send a 10 gigabit ultra HD signal down there sometimes,
or,
I guess.
or uncompressed 25 gig one, but
Yeah,
yes.
there you go. Well, that's great, Dave. So, is there anything that you think the NAB audience really needs to know about IPMX that maybe we haven't talked about?
Well, there's lots of little details, but I think that the biggest action is really that if you're knowledgeable on 2110, this really is not such a stretch for you to get familiar with. It's a hard 1 hour work. There's a lot of good content online already and growing all the time. And if you are looking for these smaller studios, smaller shops, simpler solutions, maybe to fill in some particular spots, I think IPMX can be interesting, and either join one of the groups if you happen to be involved in any of these organizations. Can't make an excuse now. They're in every organization. There's at least one. Sit into a couple of meetings. I'm sure you'll get a quick idea of what it's all about. And if you are interested, maybe you even want to help steer or bring in some of your requirements so that we can make sure that we're including those types of solutions for you. It's the right time now because we're still in the formative stage, right? So
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
it easier to take in a requirement right now.
Well, very good. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this. We'll be, hopefully seeing you maybe in the real world instead of a virtual event in the not too distant future. But
Hopefully.
for the time being, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime, Wes. Thanks a lot for your time too.